happening, you can use the hashtag #FutureOf and tag us at BusinessWorthy. The bar is open, washrooms are in the back, should be all you need to know. And so we're here, obviously, to talk about the future of the ocean. And I have to tell you that, unfortunately, our moderator, Adela, from Development Goals Forum, wasn't able to make it because of illness, so I'm going to stay on stage and try and fill those big shoes. I am personally not an ocean expert. I grew up very much inland, in the middle of a continent, but since moving to Norway, it's been really nice to start to understand what it means to have a personal relationship with the ocean, and to be part of a society that really cares about oceans. And luckily, it doesn't matter that I don't know oceans, because we have 3 phenomenal experts from Norway who know everything and more about this topic. So I'm pleased to welcome them to the stage. We have Nina Jensen, who is CEO of REV Ocean. Vidar Helgesen is Norway's special representative for the ocean and a former Minister of Climate and the Environment. And then Christina Spiten is a senior corporate advisor of plastics and circular economy at WWF Norway. Thank you all for joining us. We're really looking forward to this conversation we're about to have. So to get started, if each of you could take a few minutes and tell us about your work and what you do, just so we have that big picture for context. You're looking at me, so you can start.
Yeah, well, my name is Christine. First and foremost, I'm an oceans person. And that's sort of the baseline of everything I do. A few years back, I co-founded a company called Blue Eye Robotics. And that was in order to inspire and to bring the ocean to people. So we developed an underwater drone, which can be used and controlled by anyone and sort of bring the oceans into everything from classrooms to boardrooms. And it's about connecting people, really, to the oceans. Today, I work in WWF, so much more closer to one of the many challenges that the ocean is facing, which is plastics in the ocean. So I work now as a senior advisor to solve the big plastic issue and work on circular economy, which is part of the solution in order to do so. And in addition to that, I spend as much time as I can by or on the ocean, being a sailor, being part of Entrepreneurship One.
Great, thanks.
I'm also an oceans person. I don't spend as much time in or under or by the ocean as these ladies, I suspect, but I currently spend a lot of time working with 13 other governments alongside the Norwegian government in trying to put forward proposals to the world about how we can manage the oceans better and how we can, through managing, both produce more and protect better. I do this because I'm driving, my Prime Minister has taken an initiative and is chairing a panel of 14 heads of state and government that represent together 30% of the world's economic zones and 30% of the world coastlines. And they will be, based on a rigorous scientific process, they will be distilling recommendations to the world that will be produced before the UN Ocean Conference, which is going to take place in June this year in Lisbon, Portugal. So I'm leading that work and currently in the gist of negotiations with 13 other governments on how to come up with proposals that will be meaningful. Norway is very close to the ocean. We have a strong ocean economy. Essentially, our economy is largely an ocean economy. Many, many countries haven't really recognized the potential of their oceans. But even more seriously, they haven't also recognized how deeply damaged the ocean is and how bad the trajectory of the ocean is. So we need to do 2 things. We need to turn the trajectory. We need to make the ocean regenerate again. And if we do that, we can also produce more. And to achieve the SDGs, we actually need to produce more food, more clean energy, and more clean transport from the oceans.
Interesting. We'll pick up on that later. Thanks.
So I'm a marine biologist, a passionate ocean conservationist, and have pretty much decided to dedicate my life to saving life in the ocean. I don't spend as much time as I would like in the ocean, but hopefully more on and under it going forward. I've spent more than 15 years of my life working in WWF, World Wildlife Fund. And recently did a switch that I never thought I would, but I'm now working together with a Norwegian billionaire, Mr. Kjell Inge Røkke, and together we've started up an initiative called REV Ocean. And our ambition is no less than making the ocean healthy again. And we want to do that by improving our knowledge and understanding of the ocean, making that knowledge more readily available, but more importantly, turning it into concrete solutions. And we don't have much time. We've done a lot of damage to the ocean in our lifetime. In 40 years, we've lost more than 40% of life in the ocean, and the situation is escalating. So we really need to act fast, which is why it's pretty amazing for me as a conservationist to team up with a capitalist and an industrialist, because then you can really start to make things move, I hope.
Great, thank you. Like I said, definitely the experts. So maybe we can then start our discussion by looking at challenges. Of course, the media picks up on certain things, plastic straws, oil spills, but I'm curious, what are the key ocean-related challenges that each of you are most concerned with? Anyone can start.
So in REV Ocean, we've identified 3 areas that we want to prioritize. Plastics, as Christina mentioned, climate change, and overfishing. And by far, despite all the buzz around plastics, overfishing is still the major problem for the ocean. So coming up with solutions for how we can manage fisheries more sustainably, avoid destruction of important habitats, and restore habitats that have been destroyed, replenish fisheries that have been depleted, is among the things that we want to prioritize research on in REV Ocean. And I forgot to mention that our way of doing it is that we are currently building the world's largest and most advanced research and expedition vessel. It will be 182 meters long, and offered as a free platform for scientists and ocean enthusiasts from all over the world to come on board with the sole purpose of creating real solutions to these problems. So overfishing, climate change, and plastics.
Great, thanks.
I would agree, and I would add biodiversity loss because it's the 4th big issue. But it's related to the other ones. It's related to overfishing, it's related to climate change. Climate change is causing huge damage to coral reefs around the world, and coral reefs are home to so much of the world, of the ocean's life. I would also say that plastic is not the only source of pollution. Pollution is a huge problem. Plastic is a big one. But we also shouldn't forget that runoff from agriculture, nutrient runoff from excessive fertilization is a huge issue. Urban wastewater, most megacities are on the ocean. Many of them don't have good wastewater treatment. And these things add to sucking oxygen out of the ocean. And again, there are interplays here because climate change is also sucking oxygen from the ocean. So we have an interplay of problems that is really big. And when that happens, I think the volume of dead zones around the world has more or less doubled over the last 50 years, which again means that there is less production potential for fish. So these things are really interlinked.
Can you explain what a dead zone is for people that might not know?
A dead zone means an ocean territory which is so deprived of oxygen that life is essentially dying. We have one fairly close to this region, the Baltic Sea, is largely, or to a large extent, already a dead zone. But there are huge, huge territories. The Mississippi Delta is probably the most famous globally, but these zones are expanding, and we really shouldn't forget about that.
Let you contribute to this list of scary things.
Well, everything that's been said is obviously right, and I guess we base our work on the same scientific reports. But I want to add the most worrying parts, in my opinion, is the lack of knowledge, the dead zones of knowledge, if you like, because we know nothing about the ocean. We know something about what's in coastal or close areas, but we don't bring it to people. It's very few people who knows how to manage the ocean, and most of them don't do that in a sustainable or in a good way. So I think if we can make sure somehow, and I think there's a few suggestions or options on how to do that within this panel, but on just bringing more knowledge about the ocean to people, because we need everyone on board. We need all hands on deck in order to save the ocean. It's not something only the government can do or the big corporates can do. We need to bring it into schools. It's wild that we don't have marine biology or topics on the oceans in schools in Norway as a coastal country. So I think we need to start with the knowledge and start with the enthusiasm and with the interest and all the engagement around the ocean, because I think it's much more easier to solve the big challenges once we know what they are and which of them is most urgent, and when we have the whole grassroots movement together with us in order to do so.
Okay. So that's a perfect transition. Oh, go ahead, you can applaud for that. So I did want to then start talking about how we approach some of these challenges. What does it mean to achieve sustainable ocean management? No one owns the ocean. No one country has the ocean. No person solely responsible. So what collaborations are needed from each of your perspectives?
Vidar?
Go ahead, Vidar. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you said no one owns the ocean, and of course in a metaphysical way that's correct. But actually under international law, each coastal state has responsibility for its exclusive economic zone. Regrettably, many of those zones are essentially elusive economic zones. They're not well managed. There's been a free-for-all approach to the ocean, which we don't have on land. I mean, the ocean is lagging a century and more behind land when it comes to spatial planning. And that's just not tenable, because we need to plan for the ocean. We need to balance or make sure that we operate human activity based on ecosystem knowledge, and that the different varieties of human activity and industrial activity with the ocean are balanced against each other. And the more we need the ocean, we're going to need more of the ocean territory for offshore wind. We're going to need more of the ocean territory for fisheries and aquaculture, all of which need to be environmentally sound. But they need space, and we need to manage that space better. Norway is doing that fairly well compared to many countries. But if you look around the world, it's really not managed well. And that's where it starts, with the responsibility of coastal states. And then, of course, if you do your homework well, you're also better placed to collaborate with your neighboring countries, with adjacent coastal territories, and globally. But I think we need to really start with the responsibility of the coastal state.
Are your peers listening when you start to try and talk about what you're doing well in Norway and trying to jointly
Yeah, I
steward
think
coastal
there is an increasing recognition. There's a lot of hype around the high seas, and that's good. I mean, don't misunderstand me. And there are very important negotiations going on now about biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, which is a really landmark negotiation under the the UN law of the sea. But most of the biodiversity exists within national jurisdiction. Most of human activity exists within national jurisdiction, and most of the problems come from land. So we need states to take better responsibility.
I think the initiative taken by Prime Minister Solberg, the high-level panel, is an excellent example of what we need to solve ocean challenges, is to bring coastal states together to improve our knowledge and understanding, to share knowledge across the states, and also hopefully develop solutions together. I mean, there's a lot of knowledge about the ocean. There's a lot of solutions providers. There's a lot of businesses linked to the ocean, but there's limited connection across these different disciplines, if you like. And actually connecting the dots, connecting the knowledge with the solution providers, showcasing and making the data and the information and the knowledge more readily available, making sure that businesses commit and engage to changing their practices and solving some of the problems that they've caused. I mean, all of these things are an essential part of the problem. So one of the things that we decided to do was to establish the Global Ocean Data Foundation, which is a non-profit, non-compete foundation where we want to bring together all the data and knowledge about the ocean in one place and make it readily available, free for anyone to access it, so that you can actually see what is going on in the ocean. You're connecting the different pieces of data that is currently sitting in individual silos or within a specific country or a research institute, but combining it so that you can actually get that overview of what's happening in the ocean, and then it's more easy to see where do you need to target the action, who are the perpetrators that are responsible, how can you monitor the ocean better, where are the big gaps in our knowledge, and so forth. So hopefully that can be part of the solution as well.
That's great. Has that already launched? Can people follow that and look it up now?
Yeah, it's already launched. There's even someone from the Ocean Data Foundation here today. So they're working really hard to I mean, there's so many different data sources out there. I think they've mapped out something like 54,000 databases or data sources about the ocean that are open. And then we haven't even started talking about all the closed data sources that will need to be opened to get the full insight. But they're working really hard, developing both the team and the technology and the user cases. So one of the first ones that they launched was one on coral reefs, to try and showcase in a much better way what is happening with the coral reefs, which ones are dying the quickest, what are the big impacts, which are the ones that can actually be saved, and so forth. But this is all work in progress. But yeah, please do track them both in social media and elsewhere. And if you have data sets that you would like to share or ideas for user cases, then do reach out to them or us to do so.
Perfect. Great.
Ocean Data Foundation.
Then, Christina, your work seems all about collaboration, so I'll let you speak to that as well, what you think is sort of most critical in terms of working together.
I think, connecting those with the knowledge, like you say, or those who have a technology or a solution you want to test out, the best way you can help them to actually test or prove or showcase the solutions is by being their partner, being their customer, supporting them. And there's a lot of cool things happening at Catapult Ocean here in Oslo, and there's many other accelerators focusing on the ocean around the world. And I think what we need is just to applaud and to showcase or just focus on the testing. It's okay to test. I think here in Norway, we're still a little bit afraid of trying out or testing something that's not yet perfect because we're afraid of losing our face or to fail. So we need those areas where we are allowed to test and try out the solutions. And that's also where some of the most interesting collaborations grow from. Yeah.
And I think that's a really important point. So one of the things that we've said for the research vessel that we're building is the crazier the idea, the better. Because unless you dare to go outside of the normal, what's currently being applied, you're probably not going to solve the problems. And we particularly want to engage younger people. So we're hoping to set up a global audition for young kids aged 12 to 25 from all over the world to come up and present their wild ideas, and then we'll pick the best ones out of those that are put forward, and invite 25 of these young kids on board the vessel every year to test out their idea and see if it can be developed into a technology or a concrete solution.
That's so great, and like you said, it's urgent right now, the state that we're in. So as fast as we can innovate, the better. So then I did want to pick up on technology. I think that there are people out there that hope that some future invention will save us all from climate change and the impact on the ocean and clean up plastic. I'm not sure if that's realistic or a wise hope, but I am curious what some tech innovations each of you are seeing that are coming out of your space in the oceans that you're actually quite excited about. Let's talk about the future. Go ahead. Yeah.
Can I start? I'm really excited about everything on new material technology. So for instance, we see now how we can create a substitute to plastics from seaweed, sustainable seaweed farming, and farming, just seafood farming, how we can combine fish farming with seaweed farming, with seashells farming, and how that is a much, much better solution to the environment and providing us more food in a greener way. Better for the ocean, better for the people, and profitable for business. I think there's a lot of good examples that are being tried out at small scale, which I believe will grow and get a much bigger space in our future food industry, not least, and also as part of the solutions to the plastic problem. And there's also a lot of technology that's being tried out at the moment to both clean up but also to stop plastics from entering the oceans. So some of them are like trash wheels or the Pacific garbage screening, which is similar to the ocean cleanup project that Boyne Slot has. But it's going deeper, and it's sort of like pumping up everything that's entering the oceans from the biggest rivers, created by a young girl from Germany. So lots and lots of cool technologies, and last but not least, those the robots that can go deeper and stay longer and connect with people in classrooms and on board. You have the I think it's just called the Ocean Human, which looks like a person really, and can go to many hundred meters deep and explore.
It is exciting. I'd love to have that in a classroom.
I think
live stream of that. Why not?
Yeah, but I think we also need to, like Nina said, be bold and come up with those crazy ideas and applaud them and support them, because they might be the ones that actually end up solving some of the biggest challenges we're facing.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of very exciting innovations taking place, partly because of technology. And new technologies can make ocean science, ocean mapping, ocean resource assessments not only more precise, but also cheaper, because this technology is much more available at a lower price. But then there's nature itself, as you said, seaweed for plastics. Another interesting piece of research that is indicative but very interesting nonetheless is that if you mix seaweed into cattle feed, indications are that will reduce methane emissions from cattle by up to 80%. So it's incredible. These
huge.
are the kinds of things that, it's not high tech, it's just what my grandparents or great-grandparents did when they couldn't afford buying fodder. They went to pick seaweed. Then, of course, there are exciting applications like fish face technology. If you want, as a fisherman, to know if the fish you just caught is sustainable catch, you can use your iPhone use the fish face app to see whether you should release it again or whether you can sustainably catch it. I mean, it's out there. And I think on the REV Ocean ship, you're going to use that technology in a big scale.
Yeah.
It can also be used on the iPhone level. And then I think there are also exciting opportunities in mixing initiatives across the different fields. There are opportunities in combining offshore wind farms with aquaculture, which also, of course, makes space use more efficient at sea. There are also indications that offshore wind farms can function more or less like semi-protected areas and therefore give better wild catch of fish as well. Lots of exciting stuff, both with technology and with nature itself.
I'm very divided when it comes to technology. I mean, I'm an optimist, and I think technology can solve a lot of challenges. And I mean, it's hard not to get excited about drones or whatever fancy new technologies that come on board. But it's also a way of keeping us from doing the right things, because we think that technology sometime in the future will come and magically save us, when we really know what the right choices are. You know, we know that we're emitting way too much carbon dioxide for the planet to, or for us to survive, and then yet we're hoping that some miraculous technology will come and fix that we can just continue as before. We'll keep on opening up new oil fields, we'll continue mining for coal, and then some magic CCS mechanism or whatever technology will fix that, and it probably won't. And what we should be doing is just say, no, we simply cannot open up any more new oil and gas fields. It's done. We've far surpassed that limit already. So that's why I'm divided when it comes to technology, because it's also keeping us from using our brain and making the right choices. You know, all the signals are there. Nature is just screaming it at us every single day, and we're just ignoring it. And then, yeah. But the technology that gets me most excited at the moment is... so I am divided. I'm a bit schizophrenic.
Good to hear both.
But it's artificial intelligence and machine learning, and how we can use that to understand and process data much more rapidly, because we now have a lot of data and knowledge about the ocean, but we're not really putting it to good use. So if we can speed up that process by using artificial intelligence and machine learning, we can much more rapidly disseminate what's going on, what needs to happen, and also really hold the different actors, whether it's business or governments, accountable for their actions.
Great, thanks. And I think your skepticism is very important, and worth talking about as well. That, and maybe this is a false question, but where do we start? Is it policy? Is it business leaders of their own hearts making good decisions? Is it consumer demand? You know, you mentioned the CBD options exist, but that's not widespread yet. So does one of these things have to come first for us to actually get our acts together and change, or is it just a perfect balance?
I think that depends on where you are. If you're in Europe, there's a lot of interesting and exciting policy now coming out of the new European Commission in Brussels. If you look at the new Green Deal for Europe, it's a catalogue of initiatives that will be coming this year and next, with huge implications for Norway as well. If you live in the US, I would look to business rather than the federal government.
I don't, but I'm in Canada.
And there's a lot happening in business, going after sustainability in their value chains and their supply chains, for example, which can have a very positive effect.
Personally, I think the sector that holds the most promise is business.
Okay.
And particularly because they're really waking up to the large problems out there, and seeing that where there are large problems are also huge business opportunities. And they can turn around quite quickly and solve things, whereas governments, Well, things tend to take quite some time.
But I think when you say that, of course, businesses are the ones that have the greatest propulsion to actually make things happen. But it's equally important that there are someone who makes sure that what happens is not just creating another problem. So I think we all need to be on watch. This is our watch. We all need to do our part from wherever, whichever platform or whichever role we have in our lives. And but I think it's a very good point you had as well about the technology. Like, technology is never going to solve anything unless we put it in the hands of good people with an understanding for the environment around us. So it's how we apply the technology that matters in the end. And I think sometimes I stumble upon some quite cute or good solutions. For example, there's one of the startups in Catapult that has created those cement bricks, if you like, that can replace huge nets that are today being used to hold down pipes and construction parts on the seabed for windmill parks. And windmill parks offshore are, they're put there to create green energy, and it's a good alternative to coal or to oil. But then again, we put plastics on the ocean to keep the construction in place. So it's like, but instead these guys came up with some simple bricks that are also forming artificial reefs and making the ecosystem grow and thrive again in those areas. So sometimes the solutions doesn't have to be that complex or technological. Just use our minds and keep don't disconnect ourselves from nature, but see what does the nature need, because usually that's what we need as well.
And I think it's also important not to always point the finger that it's somebody else that has to solve the problem. I mean, like you say, I think it's a mix of us doing the right things, businesses doing their part, governments playing their part, innovators, technology experts developing cool new gadgets and technology and solutions. But the reason why we're in this mess is because of a lot of individual decisions. And it does make a difference what each and every one of us do, even though it's always easy to say it doesn't matter if I recycle or if I eat less meat or if I use less energy. But of course, if everyone did that, it would make a huge difference. And if you do it, if you inspire the people around you to do it, they inspire the people around them to do it, then all of a sudden you can actually have a huge impact. And I mean, it's just see the impact that a person like Greta Thunberg, for example, has had on the whole climate debate. She's just one person, but she did something at the right point in time that really had a massive impact. And I think we can all, we don't all have to be Greta Thunberg, but we can all make a difference and stop pointing the finger.
That's great, and I think that's a great point to pick up on, is that, I mean, this is a room of individuals, and some might have businesses or have policy roles, but is there sort of that key piece of advice that you want everyone to walk away with of their role in ocean sustainability?
I think the single piece of advice is that there is no single piece of advice, because we need to do so much. Governments need to provide that holistic planning framework that can enable good activities to take place. But otherwise, what we need to do, just take the ocean and climate change. Our scientists have found that additional action and largely industry in the ocean can deliver up to a fifth of what we need to get to the 1.5 degree target by offshore clean energy, particularly offshore wind, by greening shipping, by seafood production, which can be boosted significantly and which is much more climate friendly than land-based proteins, by nature-based solutions, mangroves, kelp forest, etc., and by carbon capture and storage, which is a limited part of the story. And unleashing all these things require a lot of conditions put in place by governments, a lot of technological innovation, a lot of civil society pressure on governments to do the right things. So there is a lot that needs to be done, and that's only on climate change.
Yes. And I guess what I'll call sort of this positive peer pressure, you're saying that, you know, when you're out for dinner and you're making these sustainable choices, if you talk about it to who you're with, they sort of start to learn as well. That's great. Do you want to comment as well?
Be curious. And there's always going to come new solutions, new options to be part of the solution. So just never think that you know enough or know the one answer, because I agree there's not one answer. But stay curious and continue to learn and, yeah, try and do your part.
Great. Well, we're talking about you, but let's include you. We can turn over to our audience question and answer time now. My colleague Caroline has the microphone this time, so if you put your hand up. Oh, she does not have a microphone. Olav is bringing you a microphone. Yes, so maybe we can start with that question there, because that's where he is.
Soon it will.
Yes? Yes, it's on. Hi, my name is, well, no, it doesn't work. Yeah, does it work? Yeah. Okay. My name is Mirjana, and Christine mentioned the grassroots. Nina mentioned that we all need to participate and we should come up with the crazy ideas. And Vidar said about 13 countries that you are supporting. So here's one. I'm particularly interested in plastics, and I was looking at the PET plastic. And on a yearly basis, we lose about 43 billion because we are not collecting. The thing with plastics is, for PET, is that we don't have infrastructure, and I believe we have a wrong business model, because startup companies are left to do their own scaling, which takes hell of a lot of times. So I did some calculation, and here's the bold idea. And I think it can contribute to education. If each one, we have 5.6 billion mobile subscribers. 3 billion has an income. If each of us gives $1 per month, that would make 3 billion per month. That would make 36 billion per year. For that amount of money, I believe we can help a lot of companies. And I'll give you an example, one in the Netherlands. One factory costs 13.3 million. So we can build 2,706 factories. If we build them up in Vietnam, in Sri Lanka, we can stop pollution of plastic ocean, at least in those parts. So your comments, is it bold enough?
I really like the idea. I'm not sure if we should be spending that money to help companies solve the problem, but there's a lot of great initiatives out there that could benefit largely from a fund and from that kind of commitment. But definitely part of the solution is to scale up infrastructure and waste management in the countries that don't have that today. But from my perspective, that should be paid for by the petrochemical companies, those that are producing the plastic, but also those that are buying the plastic and using it in their packaging and in their bottles. They have plenty of money that they should be held accountable for the waste that they're producing.
There is actually a very interesting initiative underway. It's one of Australia's wealthiest businessmen who has launched this, which is a campaign to put a levy on virgin plastics. And one of the problems, or the fundamental problem, is that plastic is too cheap. Producing new plastic is so cheap that it doesn't make business sense to recycle. So what he has suggested, and he's trying to mobilize exactly these companies to agree voluntarily to put a tariff on virgin plastic and let the proceeds of that go into a fund that will do what you're suggesting. And that would be building this into the business models. If he succeeds with that, I think that would be the single most important thing.
And he is putting $1 billion into it himself.
Yeah, no, he's got a...
Great. Just interesting on that note, because we've been trying to do the same in Norway for the past 7 years with Ringnes and Infinitum in front. And it's already gone through all the parties. but stopped at the financial department. So we need to put some more pressure to make that happen, because the idea has been around for a while, and there's a bottleneck that needs to be torn up, I think.
So that's
I'm fully
one
aware of the
single
situation.
advice for people here. That's where you can apply pressure to make that happen.
It's good advice. Get involved. We have a question here and then over there.
Yeah, hi, I'm Johan. I've spent with some people here 3-4 years looking at the same problem. We're not the only ones. I think everyone is consumed with it. We call this the disconnect. What we find is knowledge changes all the time. And the problem is you come with some knowledge and then you're told you're wrong. All of a sudden you're like bad. We don't have this normal in startups. So the angle we're coming from in startups, like you should be wrong, you should push, as Christina says. You should go out there. And it's actually hard sometimes. Politicians, if you go for a policy and it's wrong, it's like changing it is actually out of office. So it's something that us as public as well, we should look at, this is an innovation problem. I don't think this is a technology problem, it's an innovation problem. But what I'm interested to hear about is this disconnect we see. Is we've been able over the last centuries to actually change billions of people's our behaviors. We've seen it. Like Facebook is actually one example. We know how to change billions of people's behaviors. There seems to be a disconnect between that all of us are trying to solve these small problems, and that actually the problem is very wide and very big, and that's where we stop. We tend to want to go and do the small things because it seems near, but actually the bigger one, as you're saying, making the big choices. Like, why don't we do that? From my perspective, is this disconnect that we see from schools and everywhere, where we actually don't know how to do that anymore. And we left it to technology companies to create push notifications and addiction machines to make behavior change. But these are the ways of doing it. Now, I'd be interested, for us personally, this is the way to create room for innovation. That is regulation, it's opening up for business, and probably realizing that I don't think we as a population is educated to see what's going on. We're blind to the facts that's going on. So the question is do we have the time to do this at school, or do we need to put businesses to school? Is this actually a proper grown-up education 101?
It's a big question. Whoever wants to
I would put
take a stab.
businesses to school. I mean, I think they can. They should be solving the problems that they've created, but they're largely ignorant to the problems created by the businesses that they're operating. So I would put business at school.
But I would say it's yes, but how do you incentivize them? And there's no way you can escape the responsibility of governments to put regulations in place and incentives and different tools that governments have in their toolbox. And one of them, I think a really fundamental one, is that we're operating still with a GDP model which originated in the 1930s, when that was the only data we had. Today, we have much more data. We were able to quantify, we're able to value natural capital. It's just that we don't do it. So if you put that natural capital data, those natural capital metrics into the finance ministries, you'll get a number of different results than you do with the 1930s model that we're still pursuing.
But I would also put scientists into startups. And I discussed this last week, actually, at university in Oslo. Just to because there's a lot of research going on without the understanding of how this research would ever be applied. And it takes too long time at the research level as well. So would it be cool to put the researchers in a startup where it's crisis every Tuesday and you're pushing through, and you know how this these innovative processes are happening in a startup. But I think what we're really lacking is this interface between businesses, between scientists, and between innovation startups, students, and kids. We need this common platform, or not a platform, but rather an interface, maybe, a place to meet around the challenges.
Or a big floating ship.
Yeah. Yeah.
That can do exactly that. At least that's what we're hoping.
That's a welcome on board.
Yes, right?
Yeah, but I think exactly that you need to bridge all these different people together. You need to put the scientists together with those that can create the solutions. The scientists can't necessarily do that, but they can tell you what's happening, and then the innovators and the tech experts can come up with the ideas for how to solve it, and then you can put the regulators there so that they can apply the regulations needed to implement the technology. And then you can have businesses there or investors that would be willing to put money into making it happen, and then maybe things can happen a bit more quickly.
And culture change is, I guess, a topic in itself. Maybe we'll save it for another time, but yes, it's sort of end up in our silos talking to each other, and I think, yeah, how do we bring science to life and to the everyday person is a really interesting question. We have a question at the back, two more at the front, so if we could all be quite brief so we can get to everybody, that would be great.
Hello, thank you. I'm Amy. My question is that we've come at this very much from a developed country perspective, so I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on countries maybe like India, which have a massive boost in their population, and the education levels there regarding recycling, plastic and waste is going into the ocean is massive. So I was just wondering what we can do from here for those oceans.
Thanks.
I think we have a unique position because we're such a small country, and we have the opportunity to test out solutions. But we need to keep in mind that these solutions are best applied if we apply them in India or in Bali, or especially when it comes to plastic, where there's no waste management whatsoever. But I think we also need to bridge, I think is a key word here as well, because it's easy for us to come up with solutions that can shoot down an already existing infrastructure or informal infrastructure, including hundreds of thousands of people having their only income from picking plastics off the streets or the beaches. So it's quite hard to implement sometimes, but I think still we should utilize the position we have to come up with good ideas, but also collaborate and form partnerships with the local communities in those countries you're mentioning. And WWF recently launched a project we're going to have together with GRIG Foundation in the Philippines, where we're going to collaborate with the local WWF office, but also the harbor managers and the local schools and communities to investigate how we can solve the waste management systems around the harbor areas, together with GRIG being a shipping company, with their expertise and with their knowledge, bringing that into the project. I think that would be a very, very interesting project to follow on for the next 3 years. So more of those kind of partnerships. Like, it's not the most perhaps intuitive partners, but I think those are the ones we need.
I think that's a very good point. In addition, I think the developing countries could do one relatively simple thing, and that's stop exporting our waste to countries that don't have waste management facilities. I mean, it's shameful. We're producing all of this waste. We're becoming rich from producing and using the waste, and then we're exporting our waste to countries that have no way of dealing with it, and we just wash our hands, because we're doing recycling here. But what on earth does recycling mean when it ends up in the ocean anyway, because you're exporting it at the end of the day?
So I've seen at least 3 hands. So I'll let you each ask your question and then let you sort of choose what you can say as summary remarks, just so we hear everyone's points. Did you still want to say something? And then we'll come to you, and then there was one here.
He's been very passionate. Yes, he hasn't come. You can absolutely ask them after the event as well, in case you're burning to ask questions.
It's actually not a question. Johan Williams is my name. The gap between the rich part of the world, us, and the poor part of the world is increasing. 1 billion people are starving. The number is increasing. And our answer is to ban the use of plastic straws. My point is, we are not able to save the ocean for the people before we have addressed the issue of poverty and hunger. Thank you.
We'll let you say your comment as well. Thanks, Caroline.
I guess this is probably the last question or something, or yeah, I don't know. But this was absolutely amazing. So thank you so much for being here today and all the amazing work that you do. I just have like a few elephants in the room that I want to bring out. And,
It's whales in the ocean.
Okay, yeah, sorry. A few whales. I have 3 whales in the ocean that I want to bring out, if that's better. And the first one is, as accounting for exports, we are the 6th worst country in the world in terms of carbon emissions, right? So I think, that's a really important aspect here to sort of like keep in mind. And the second one is, Equinor in Australia. What's up with that? Why are we not talking about this? And the Australian reef. My third one is on the topic of AI, because we talk about AI and we often talk about energy, but we don't talk about supply chain, right? Because minerals, logistics, servers, cooling, all that sort of thing, right? So, I mean, we are living in a historic time, It was crazy to see children in the streets, over the course of the last year, and still, and in September, 7.6 million children in the streets, and adults together with them. I mean, we are living in a crazy time where we can address this climate crisis because we have recognized it. So I mean, following up from your previous question, sort of how do we build this culture of honesty? Because we have to be more honest, right? Companies have to be more honest. So how do we build those cultures of honesty in companies?
Great, thank you. So I don't expect you to all address all 4 of those points, but if you have sort of a brief summary comment, then I do have a final closing question to ask all of you.
Yeah, well, if I could start. I actually don't think the oil and gas question is an elephant or a whale in the room, because it's being discussed all over the place. And that is an indication that it's dawning on us. It's a transformational issue. I mean, when the combustion engine came, it was seen as a solution to the serious environmental problem of horse dung in the streets, Today we know better. We're in a transformation. We need to get away from fossils. And in politics, I'm not a politician anymore. In politics, this is obviously a struggle. And it's a struggle not because so many people necessarily are poor, but because it's about jobs and all that. So, but I do think that we're on the cusp of some really, really, really important and critical discussions in this country that are starting to hit home in politics as well, and coming not least from finance, from investment. More has happened in banking, insurance, and investment over the last 12 months than in the past 30 years, coming from a perspective of climate risk, where investors are demanding climate risk assessment from companies. More and more are moving away totally from fossils through divestment, and this is really catching on. So, and no sane politician can ignore that. So it's a transformational issue. We need to do a lot on reducing demand for oil and gas. Norway is doing quite a lot in that respect, but on the push side, there is a lot of discussion or a lot of pressure now coming from finance, which will, I think, change politics over the next few years. Now, on the issue of poverty, I so much agree. We tend to think of the SDGs as having to do with the environment and having to do with the economy, and they do, but they're also about people and people's livelihoods. And the ocean is actually an opportunity there. Our scientists say we can produce much more seafood. Already today, I mean, we have 71% of the planet's territory producing only 5% of the world's food. the potential is huge. Not only can we, but we have to, because we can't go on with agriculture the way we do today. But already, even if fish and seafood production is so small, it's already a bigger value for developing countries in terms of export. It's a bigger export value than all agricultural production. So that's quite telling of the opportunities that are there in the ocean economy for poor countries, poor coastal countries, and with no or very little environmental cost. And I think that people dimension is really, really important.
I would absolutely agree, and thank you for raising that point, Johan. When I worked in WWF, we used to say that environment and development are two sides of the same coin, and we will certainly not solve the environmental issues without lifting people out of poverty and securing development opportunities. So it's an absolutely essential point. How to do that, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a very complicated picture, but it has to be resolved. In terms of honesty and the whales in the room, I couldn't agree with you more, and there are certainly more whales than the ones that you brought up. But Norway likes to travel around the world and proclaim to be this big environmental champion when we are certainly a major contributor to a lot of the problems, and annually we're exporting more than 10 times our total emissions through the oil and gas sector, and we think that we can just continue as before. And the biggest provocation this year was when, for me, was when our Prime Minister said that there is no better way to start the climate year 2020 than opening up Johan Sverdrup, which is a new oil field, and then you just totally don't get it. So there are a lot of whales out there, and thankfully. But we need to hold, I would translate your honesty into transparency and accountability. And that's where, again, I think data and sharing of data is really, really important. So really making it clear who's responsible, what's happening, and what can be done about it.
And that's part of what it comes back to with the extended producer responsibility that's we've been talking about, but also you mentioned climate accounting, which all companies have to do today. You have to report on the climate risk your company's putting out. But for this year, we have an upcoming meeting in Kunming by the end of October, which is going to be hopefully as big as the climate meeting was back in Paris in 2015. And hopefully out of that meeting, it's going to come a nature agreement, an international nature agreement, which is going to hold all the companies also accountable for the nature risk, which is far more, that's a whole other picture than climate risk, because you then have to account for the consumption of fresh water, of areas where you're growing your crops, or how you produce. And it's interesting when you look into different industries, for instance, the textile industry, it's not only about material, it's actually mostly about the process and how you produce those textiles and clothes. So the whole accounting system, so to say, is going to look quite differently. And we see how the financial sector is now putting the money on those who are transparent and who can report on their climate impact, and in the future also nature impact. So,
and I think that same thing should extend back to the energy producers, because currently they are only looking at and being held accountable for the emissions connected with the production of the product, scope 1, scope 2, but they're not held accountable for scope 3, which is what happens when you're actually using the product, which is plus 95% of the emissions. Why don't we start making the oil companies and the coal companies responsible for the scope 3, which is what happens when you're actually using it? That would turn the situation around quite dramatically, I think.
And that's what the Paris Agreement doesn't do, but that's what investors are increasingly doing.
So we could talk about this all night, but we're nearing the end of our time. I have 3 really brief announcements before our final quick question. The first is that if you personally are working on an oceans project, Business for Peace's partner at United Nations Development Program recently launched an Oceans Innovation Challenge. And they're giving grants of up to $250,000 US, which to me sounds like a lot of money to get started with. So you can head to oceaninnovationchallenge.org for details on that. Or I believe Henrietta is in the audience, and you can talk to her at the end of the event to learn more about that. The other thing is that to keep talking about these elephants and whales, we hope to see you again each month, and we'll address some of these topics that we've alluded to today. Our next event is February 26th, talking about the future of travel. And then finally, we're happy to present these events for free, to have everybody join us. We are a not-for-profit, and we just got a VIPS account last week. So if you would like to make a contribution to help us achieve our mission, feel free, but no need. You're welcome to keep joining us here for free. So since we are, I think, over our time, my last question is just 1 to 10, how optimistic are you feeling about oceans in the next 10 years? You can add 1 sentence if you'd like. No pressure.
7.
Yeah, if you compare to the last decade, I think I would say 7 as well. There's a lot of attention now rising. There's a wave, and that's good.
I was going to say 10, but I also like 7 is like a magic number. So if I say 7, then that's probably going to mean something. So I'll say 7.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your honesty, your expertise, your time. Incredibly grateful for this conversation. And feel free to stay if you have time, or to look up some of the projects they've mentioned, and to keep being great ocean advocates. So thank you very much. A big round of applause for our speakers.
Thank you.